thousands watching.
Okay, I'm live here. Hello, everyone, and welcome to Hungry for More. We just broke into laughter here. I've got my guest, Alex Schadenberg, going to join us on the program today. And I tell you, we've got a very interesting topic tonight. We're going to talk about assisted suicide. It's in the news, I guess, in a big way here in Canada. The Supreme Court of Canada has ruled to thrown out the existing law and kind of asked Parliament to make a new law. So here in Canada, I had to sadly say that you have a right to kill yourself. It's one of your constitutional rights. Who would ever think that we'd come to this one day? But it is what it is. So we're going to discuss the issue tonight with our expert on assisted suicide. We're going to have Alex Schadenberg, who is the head of the Euthanasia Prevention Coalition here in Canada, but also the director of the International Euthanasia Prevention Coalition. So we're going to ask him, as many questions as we can. Our chat room is packed tonight. We've got a number of people from all over waiting to hear what Alex has to say. We're looking for some good advice. But we're going to begin, as we always do, with prayer. And so I'll have my producer, Kent Kohalski, bring up on the screen one of my favorite prayers, invoking the intercession of Saint Teresa of Avila. And so we begin. In the name of the Father, and of the Son, and of the Holy Spirit. Amen. Let nothing disturb you. Let nothing frighten you. All things are passing. God never changes. Patience obtains all things. Nothing is wanting to him who possesses God. God alone suffices. In the name of the Father, and of the Son, and of the Holy Spirit. Amen. Easy to say, let nothing disturb you. But reading the news over the last few weeks, it's hard not to be disturbed. So I want to bring onto the screen my good friend, Alex Schadenberg from the Euthanasia Prevention Coalition. Alex, welcome to the show.
Well, Al, it's great being with you tonight, that's for sure.
Absolutely. We've had you on the show a number of times, and, every time there's something going on with euthanasia, assisted suicide, this issue won't go away. It's part of our society, and many Canadians who have been watching the news are scratching their heads, wondering what's going on. Maybe you could, of course, introduce yourself a little bit more. I mean, I have the benefit of knowing you as a family friend for over 30 years, and I remember doing events with you back in the late 80s.
A long time ago, Al.
A long time ago. But,
time ago.
Yes. Introduce yourself, and then maybe just give us a snapshot about how we got to this situation where we are today, and we'll go from there.
So I'll first talk about the Canadian scene, and then maybe we'll get into the U.S. scene a bit. But first of all, in Canada, Al mentioned that the Supreme Court struck down our laws in February of 2015. Now, what he said was not quite accurate. The Supreme Court didn't say that you have a right to suicide. It didn't say that at all. But in fact, it struck down the laws. So by doing that, per se, it meant somebody else would have the right to kill you. That's what they actually were saying by what they were doing. So in February, they did that of 2015, and they gave Parliament 12 months to legislate on the issue. So they struck down the old laws, leaving a type of a void. But they said, we're going to leave the old laws in place for 12 months. And then in February 2016, there'd have to be a law in place. What happened is we had the Conservative government coming up to an election at that point, because the election was last October. And so the Conservatives decided to do nothing. They decided they were going to act after the election. And they probably thought that if they acted on the issue before the election, it would affect them during the election. Nonetheless, they lost the election, so maybe it wouldn't have made a difference for them anyway. And nonetheless, what happened is then we had a Liberal majority get elected. So our new Prime Minister is Justin Trudeau, and he is the Prime Minister. And what they did is they went to the Supreme Court then, and the Liberals said, we'd like another 6 months to legislate on this, because, of course, nothing had been done. And so what happened is that the Supreme Court heard their decision, their request, and gave them 4 months. Now, in the meantime, this is a crazy country we live in. In the meantime, Quebec had already legislated on the issue. And on December the 10th of last year, Bill 52 went into place in Quebec, and that bill legalized euthanasia in Quebec, not assisted suicide, but euthanasia. So let me explain this first to you. Assisted suicide is when somebody would give you the means. Usually, in this case, it's a lethal dose. and you technically take it yourself. So they're assisting your suicide. That's assisted suicide. Now, of course, it can be done many ways, but nonetheless, the law said in the past, you could not assist in my suicide. And that made a lot of sense. It made an awful lot of sense. And I wish the Supreme Court had made some sense, because the fact of it is that for you to be involved in my suicide makes you complicit in my death. But on top of it, it also then creates the means for me ending my life. But there's someone else directly involved. So it's that somebody else being directly involved that becomes the legal problem, because, there's so many possibilities that could come around that. Now, euthanasia is similar to assisted suicide, but a little different. Now, those who talk about euthanasia often think of it as, it's about voluntarily. They think of it as like a voluntary assisted suicide, but that's not it. Euthanasia is a form of homicide, murder. Euthanasia is when I or somebody else kills you. You might have asked for it, that's true, but we kill you based on trying to eliminate your suffering, right? The only difference between euthanasia and any other type of homicide is the intention to deal with your suffering. So who defined the suffering? Why did I do it? Nonetheless, what the Supreme Court said in Canada is that the assisted suicide law would be struck down. So that means someone else can assist you in your suicide. But then they use language in their decision to say that if you can't, let's say you had a health condition, you couldn't actually kill yourself with assistance, then euthanasia could be done. Well, now we have a bill that's come forward in Canada, which is actually much wider than that. But anyway, so what happens is the Supreme Court gave 4 months to the federal government, but because Quebec had already legalized euthanasia, so Quebec had already gone forward and said, on December the 10th, our euthanasia bill is going to come into play. What the Supreme Court did is they said, we're going to ignore Quebec, let them go ahead. But because Quebec already has it, we're going to give judges in the rest of Canada the right to decide whether you live or die. So that's what happened. So as of this moment in Canada, other than Quebec, in Quebec, doctors can lethally inject their patients. But in the rest of Canada, people have to apply to a judge, and the judge will say yes or no, sort of like in Roman times when the gladiator lost the fight, the decision was, will he live or will he die? Sadly, it's very much like that. The judge will decide. And so we've had several euthanasia deaths in the rest of Canada. There's been quite a few in Quebec. And now we have this bill to deal with that has been brought forward by the Liberal government. Now, this is a really crazy situation. So they had a committee. The Liberals set up a committee, and they set up as the chair of this committee, this Rob Oliphant. I don't know why they chose him. His work before becoming a politician was that he was a United Church minister. Now, this sort of concerns me when a United Church minister becomes the head of a euthanasia commission. And they then made recommendations to the government. They said that euthanasia should be allowed for basically any reason. It should be allowed for also mature minors, they said, which was sort of crazy because that was much further than the Supreme Court had said. The Supreme Court said you would have to be a competent adult. Now, I'm not saying this is ever any good. Don't get me wrong. Euthanasia is always wrong because it's murder. But the Supreme Court said competent adult, and this committee said mature minors. The Supreme Court said competent adult. This committee said somebody with dementia could die by euthanasia if they had asked for it before they had dementia. Now, let's think about this committee report. Think about this. They said someone with dementia could be lethally injected, even though they're now incompetent, if they had requested it earlier. Now, let's think about this. If I'm told by my doctor that I have dementia, is it not possible that I might have a lot of fear? Is it not possible that I might be reacting to that with a lot of fear and worry for my future? And is it not possible I might write in my power of attorney that when I become incompetent, please lethally inject me? And I'm saying that out of fear. Now I have dementia, and I enjoy watching baseball. I'm incompetent, but I'm enjoying my baseball. I'm a happy guy. I'm sitting there. I like watching baseball every day, or I like watching Hungry for More. And now they're saying, but you signed the document, and now the person who's the power of attorney is saying to the doctor, well, he's now completely incompetent, so we'll go ahead with his request. That's what we're talking about. I'm not saying that is a definite possibility here. And that's what they were saying could be legal. As crazy as it is. They also said, of course, doctors should not have the right of conscience. Doctors would not have to do the act. This is what the commission said. Doctors would not have to do the act, but you'd have to refer. So think about this. A doctor that does not believe in killing their patients would have to send their patient to the executioner because they're not willing to do it themselves. Now, does that make any sense? Of course not. It doesn't make any sense whatsoever. And then I've also, there was the other issue. What was the other issue? It's crazy. Well, there were several issues. But what did this bill do? This bill is full of doublespeak. Give you the first example, issue of conscience. The Minister of Health in Canada is telling everybody in the news that doctors would have the right of conscience in this bill. And in the preamble to the bill, it says, no doctors will be forced to have to do this. Doctors' conscience rights are being respected. But when you read the bill doesn't say anything about conscience rights. So the preamble has no legal bearing. The preamble does not affect the law whatsoever. It is just words on paper. It is ink spilled on the paper. That's what the preamble is. It doesn't have any legal bearing. The actual bill doesn't give any conscience rights. In fact, it does the opposite. What it says is if somebody were to ask the doctor or nurse, because in this case it gives it power to both doctors and nurses in Canada, that's what the bill would do. If someone were to ask that doctor or a nurse, because the nurse is allowed to, for euthanasia, it says that doctor or nurse must send the request to the designated authority. So what the bill actually says is doctors must participate in the act in some way. It doesn't say you must send them to the executioner. It says you must send the request to the designated person. So in fact, the doctor who's opposed to killing their patients still has to tell the person who's going to arrange the killing that the request came in. So in fact, that is a form of referral. It's a step back. It's a smaller referral in a sense, but it's still a major moral question. And doctors who will not kill their patients are not going to do that either. So that's the one interesting thing. The other thing is they said, well, this is very interesting. They said, well, this bill is very tightly worded and it's going, the rules of the law must be followed. Okay, well, that makes sense. If you're going to have a law, the rules of the law must be followed. It says in the bill, the doctor or the nurse must be of the opinion that all the rules of the law are being followed. Be of the opinion. Now let's think this through. Al Smith asks for euthanasia. The doctor says he's completely incompetent. So he goes to another doctor, asks for euthanasia, and yet he's completely incompetent. But that doctor signs him up anyway, because that doctor is of the opinion that he's competent. Is that doctor, even though Al Smith is completely incompetent, is that doctor going to in any way be prosecuted? Is it possible under the wording of this law to prosecute the doctor for lethally injecting an incompetent person? Because it says of the opinion. That's all they have to claim. The doctor simply has to say in their medical records and in the filing of the format of the forms, I am of the opinion. Low standard, my friends. That does not protect anybody. Nobody will be protected. I am of the opinion. The funny thing is then the other thing is it says there must be a clear request. Okay, there must be a clear request. So then under the point of the clear request, it says, well, then the person must sign the document. So you must sign the document requesting. Okay, I must sign the document requesting. And then it says, if I am unable to sign the document, anyone who's over the age of 18 who knows what my request would be could sign the document. So Al Smith can't sign the document. I'm over the age of 18. I can sign the document. This is a ridiculous situation. It's an insane situation if you just think about the possibilities here. Even in issues around consent to treatment. So in Canada, each province, and like in the US, each state has a consent to treatment act type legislation. So what do you do when someone has to consent to treatment? What do you do when someone's incompetent to consent to treatment? Well, obviously there has to be a decision maker. So to go to the doctor and to get medical treatment, I have to consent to the treatment. Even under that, if I'm incapable of consenting, the law says my power of attorney must decide. And if I don't have a legal document stating that, then it would be my nearest relative. So in this case, it would be my wife who would decide. But this document on euthanasia, they can kill me with this, says anyone can sign who's over the age of 18 who knows what my intentions might have been. Well, what do you mean by that? Like that's craziness. Then it goes further. It says the doctor must be here. Let me look this up. 1 second. I don't want to get this wrong here. You guys are saying he got it wrong. Right here. There we go. It says the doctor must be satisfied that I signed the document. So let's say I did sign the document, or let's say it looks like I signed the document. It says the doctor must be satisfied that I signed the document. It doesn't say that the doctor must be sure that I signed the document. It must be satisfied that I signed it. So if I didn't sign the document and my wife signed it for me because she thought it'd be a good time to let me go, it only says the doctor must be satisfied that I signed the document. It doesn't mean that he must be assured that I signed the document. Like this type of language is ridiculous when we're talking about life and death. And then, you know, the craziest thing of all, and I could go through, it's like another 10 things in the bill like that. It's crazy, crazy, crazy. And remember, we're talking about life and death. When you lethally inject me, I'm not coming back. I might go somewhere else, but I'm not coming back. And it's not revocable when I'm dead, okay? Let's be brutally honest about this. This is what it's all about. So you better be pretty, if you're going to allow someone to kill me, and I think that's a crazy idea, but if you're going to allow that in law, you better be pretty darn sure what you're doing. And of course, this bill is just smoke and mirrors. Then you get the dying with dignity people, the pro-euthanasia people, and what are they saying in the media? The bill is too tight. Why is the bill too tight? Well, it doesn't allow children, and it doesn't allow people with dementia. And it says you must be terminally ill. The bill says you must be terminally ill. What does the bill actually say? What does the bill actually say? It doesn't actually say anything about terminal illness. It says right here, it must be that there's a reasonable foreseeable that my natural death is coming. Reasonably foreseeable. What does reasonably foreseeable mean? And then it said, but a prognosis is not necessary. Let's think about this. Does that actually require terminal illness when it says my natural death is reasonably foreseeable? I don't know. I don't think it does. Maybe I'm missing something. It's once again double speak because they were trying to make me or you or Al Smith feel more comfortable with the bill. And so they put these lines in, but everything's got a double to it. It's got a double negative. Another one, 15-day waiting period. So they said there has to be a 15-day waiting period, a cooling off period. So let's say I'm really in fear of my pain, or I'm really in fear of future pain. So that's usually what it more is. Let's be honest. Very, very, according to the stats out of the Netherlands and even the stats out of Oregon, very, 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 very few people die an assisted death because of uncontrolled pain. I'm not saying nobody does. I'm being honest. But very few people. But most people are afraid of pain. So that's natural. So let's say I'm asking for, because I'm afraid of pain, they have a 15-day waiting period. Well, that gives me time to think about it. So that actually makes some sense. You know, before you kill me, let me think about it a bit more. But then it says, so you'd say, oh, well, that's terrible. Someone's suffering. You're going to force a 15-day waiting period on it. That's a terrible bill. It doesn't actually say that. What it says is a 15-day waiting period, unless the doctor waives the 15-day waiting period. So there is no 15-day waiting period. It's only a suggestion. So once again, it's all smoke and mirrors. And this is what we're dealing with. And this is about life and death. This is about, are we going to kill grandma or not kill grandma? Are we going to do it in 15 days or tomorrow? Like, come on. Is she competent or is she incompetent? Well, the doctor's of the opinion that she's competent. And that is going to somehow protect us in the most vulnerable time of our life. Now, let's be honest about this. What is this issue actually about? Because people talk about my body, my choice, okay? So let's deal with the actual reality, okay? Let's move aside the false language and the waving of the flag. What's this actually about? Why I say the waving of the flag? The waving of the flag to them is it's all about choice and autonomy. And they say everybody, because everyone wants choice and everyone wants autonomy. Is it about choice and autonomy? What is it actually about? Well, what it's actually about is what the law says. The law says somebody else can cause my death. This bill specifically says a doctor or a nurse, you need 2 doctors or 2 nurses to decide. One can do the act, or anyone can do the act. Now that's crazy. The bill says a doctor or a nurse you need 2 to decide, but then to do the act, it says a doctor or a nurse could do the act, and then it says anyone can do the act. It says that anyone, it gives legal immunity to anyone who does the act. So think about this. Al decides, no, I better not use Al. I might upset his wife too much. The point of it is someone can decide, oh, it's a loving act. The last thing I'm going to do in my life, because the doctors approved it, is I'm going to inject my wife because I love her so much. Well, it doesn't actually say spouses. It says anyone. So I'm using the example that some people would say, well, maybe that is a loving act. I don't think that's a loving act to inject my spouse. Like, give me a break. But this bill would allow that. Well, think about it another way. How are you going to prosecute somebody for causing somebody else's death when that other person has some sort of lethal condition? It's going to become difficult, you know. I might have been worried about my future. I might have even asked for an assisted death. I might have been in the process, and then I'm dead. And they would say, well, what happened? Well, they didn't fulfill the whole process. We didn't get 2 doctors to agree, but we did talk to the first doctor about it already. How are you going to ever prosecute somebody? Well, you'd say, well, they broke the rules. Well, a good lawyer will get around that one. Like, this is such a wide swath that it allows to be involved with killing. You know, I don't know, maybe they talked to the mafia first before they wrote this bill. I don't know. I don't quite get it. The bill allows something that they allow nowhere in the world. First of all, for your information, the Netherlands and Belgium and Luxembourg, they allow euthanasia. And that's very sad, the Benelux countries. And there's a lot of abuse going on because of how the laws are written and how the attitudes have come. Now, let me explain that for you a second. How the laws are written. How does the law actually work? Because this is a very important question. People say it's about my body, my choice. That's a lie. It's about the rules the doctor must follow to kill you. That's what it's about. Okay. So in the Netherlands, Belgium, and Luxembourg, and Quebec, two doctors decide. One doctor kills you once they say it's okay, because once they've approved that, yes, you've fulfilled. And the doctor who kills you then has to send in a report to the government after you're dead. So it's a closed system. The person who approves it is the person who doesn't, is the person who reports it. And they call that oversight. Is that oversight? Is that actually oversight of law? Someone has killed you. They're the ones who approved it. It's not a third-party person. It's not like you went through some committee and somebody who you've never met before goes through all your medical records, examines you, and says, oh, well, maybe you qualify. No, it's this doctor approves it, and another one signs off. Then that same doctor kills you, and then that same doctor sends in a report to the government. And this is supposed to be oversight. So if I'm completely depressed and incompetent, are you going to be able to prove that after I'm dead? No, of course not. And that's how the law in Belgium and the Netherlands and Luxembourg and Quebec works. And that's exactly what they proposed for Canada, for the rest of Canada too. No oversight. So you get abuse of the law. But here, they go one step further. They're going to allow nurses to be involved. Now, why are they going to allow nurses to be involved? No other jurisdiction allows nurses to be involved. I'm not saying that nurses are any worse or better than doctors. You know, give me a break. The point of it is why are they allowing nurses to be involved? Well, because they've done all the polling and they realize most doctors want nothing to do with this. Like in Canada, less than 30% of them, I think it was 29% of the latest poll of doctors said they're willing to participate. Now, 29% of doctors is still quite a large number, but that means in some communities there are no doctors who are willing to participate. So by adding nurses into the mix, now we've got a greater number of people who will say, I'll participate. And that's why they did it. Now we go one step further. There might be doctors and nurses willing to participate, but maybe there's no doctor or nurse willing to actually do the act, lethally inject you. Well, now the bill says anyone can do it. It doesn't say my spouse can do it or family members. It doesn't say that because so-and-so might be holding my hand that we're going to give them legal immunity No, it says anyone can do it. So now you don't even need doctors and nurses to agree. All you need to have is a doctor or nurse to examine you, sign off, and Joe down the street who's been trained to lethally inject you can do it, according to the bill. You would say, Alex, you're going ridiculous. And I'm saying, no, the bill is ridiculous. It is crazy. It's insane. And this is what they're suggesting is controlled, tight. They're saying this is very restrictive. Why is it restrictive? Because we're not going to kill children and we're not going to kill people with dementia in this bill.
I tell you.
It's insane, my friend. This is an insane situation. Yeah. And you know, I can't get why so many people are buying into this. I can get the concept out of fear. I'm a human being, Al. I understand the fear people would have, fear around medical conditions, fear around their future. I understand that. But I don't understand why people would ever want to support this type of a model, which is so loose and so poorly defined that anything can go. And guess what? If anything can go, then eventually anything will go.
True.
Another point. People talk about the slippery slope. Who's ever listening to this today, stop talking about the slippery slope. We don't need to talk about a slippery slope. There's no slippery slope here. If the language of the legislation allows something, then in the end, it's going to happen. So we talk about the slippery slope. They talk about in the Netherlands, there was a slippery slope. I'm saying, no, you have a cultural shift that happened, that it became more accepted in the Netherlands. But if you look at the language of the legislation in the Netherlands and Belgium, it says physical or psychological suffering. Well, can you define psychological suffering? Well, no. So it was because the language of the legislation was so loose and widely interpreted that you have euthanasia of healthy people who are blind. You have euthanasia of people with autism. Now, that really bothers me. I have an autistic son. These autistic stories are really starting to get me. This year in Belgium, this is really a crazy one, Al. They had that story of the woman who died in Belgium by euthanasia, and she was depressed, so she wanted to die. You know, my heart goes out to her and her family. But she went to a psychiatrist. She was wanting that. She was in her mid-30s. She was wanting to be diagnosed as autistic because they've been allowing euthanasia for autism. I have an autistic son. I understand autism. People with autism, it's a difficult life in many ways. So, yeah, the psychiatrist said, no, you're not autistic. So she went to another psychiatrist. The psychiatrist said, no. She went to a third psychiatrist. That psychiatrist said, yes, defined her as autistic. And then she died by euthanasia. Now, that seems insane. That seems crazy. But it's not a slippery slope if you read the legislation. The language of the legislation can be interpreted to include autism because they say psychological suffering. Now, autism actually isn't a form of psychological suffering, but you can't define psychological suffering. Anybody watching this show right now is probably psychologically suffering. Think about it. So anyway, this is where it is, and it's becoming very, very crazy if you think about it. And I don't understand this excitement for such a crazy law that really has no safeguards at all. It's just a, as I say, it's an illusion. It's smoke and mirrors.
Wow. I think we need to work on Turks and Caicos. It's a little island in the Caribbean that the Canadians are hoping to bring as one of our new provinces. Maybe we can go there and be immune or something like that. But it is crazy listening to what you're saying as a reality of this is what can happen, and God, forbid it will happen. But lots of scary stories because we have the Belgium data, we have the data from Oregon,
yes,
places that have legislated this. But for the Canadians that are watching and will listen to us on a tape delay, either on iTunes, Stitcher, or a number of the social media that we're on, what do we do? I'm sitting at home going, this is insane.
What do we do?
What do we do? You just give us a lot of bad news, but we want to do something. we want to do something. So tell us, this is the drafted legislation. This has been read in Parliament. Many of us have copies. We've read through it. We agree with you with this crazy language, double speak, you could say. So now, I know a lot of lies, like saying our conscience rights are protected when there's no conscience rights being protected. Like, why don't they just call it? Why can't they just say what they mean? Why do they have to think we're stupid? Like, you read the bill, like, I can read. You don't have to be a lawyer to read the bill and say, and look at the language of it and say, well, what's that going to mean? Like, give me a break. Anyway, what can we do? Well, first of all, as much as it's a liberal majority government, we still have a democracy. And we are required to respond to that democracy. So we can still come out and say, absolutely, you have to vote against this bill. And I'm not sure if the bill will get defeated or not. And I don't know what the future holds at all. I can't predict it, even with a liberal majority. For the Americans out there, we have a liberal prime minister who controls the House because he's got the majority of the seats, okay? So that's the same as having, like California, you have a Democrat who's the, no, you don't actually now. It's like having a Democrat who's the governor, a Democrat-controlled House, and a Democrat-controlled Senate. That's what you have right now. So can we actually do something? Well, we have to trust democracy. We have to understand that there are some liberals who might have the strength to say to the prime minister, I'm voting against this. Okay, you might. You also might have enough of them saying I'm voting against it that would force them to have to say, well, we better change the language of this bill a little. Because if this bill gets passed, because it's a majority, and it gets passed as it's worded now, this is pretty ridiculous. People say, well, what's the future going to hold under such a piece of legislation? I can't predict it. I can tell you what it says. You can look at it yourself and see what it says. I can't predict what the future is when you see something worded like this. This is like something out of the insane asylum. Asylum. I can't understand who would write this stuff. To me, it's like, be honest and be straight. Either you're going to allow it or you're not going to allow it. If you're going to allow it, say you're allowing it. Don't tell me you're going to not allow it and then allow it at the same time in the same bill, in the same section of the bill. It's craziness. So we have democracy still. We have to also protest. A lot of Canadians, they support assisted suicide euthanasia because they fear a bad death. And we see this in the polling. And all the polling shows the same thing. But the reason the government actually, I think what they did is they rewrote the legislation near the end because they actually took a little bit longer to present the legislation than they originally said they were. And what happened is all these polls were coming out. There was an Angus Reid poll. There was another one from Nanos Research. And these are respected pollsters. And their polls were saying Canadians support assisted suicide and euthanasia, but only for the strictest circumstances. 78% of Canadians said they do not support it for psychological suffering. We don't go there. The Canadians did not support it for children. They did not support it for people with dementia. No, they did not support that. And they wanted conscience rights. I think what they did is they just, because you see in the preamble it says about conscience rights, but the bill doesn't say anything about conscience rights. So you're thinking, well, whose pillow are they trying to put over my head? Like, come on, what are you doing? The legislation has to actually be the same as the preamble. You can't have them as different. Anyway, the fact is they were responding to these polls. And now what we've heard the Justice Minister and the Minister of Health, what have they been saying to the media? The reason the bill is strict, even though it's not strict, the reason the bill is strict is because Canadians aren't ready yet. The question is, why aren't we going to allow this for children? Because Canadians aren't ready yet. Well, that means they intend to change it in the future anyway. This bill has to be defeated. There's nothing about this bill that is redeeming. I understand the Supreme Court struck down the old law. I understand the reality, but this is so bad, it's ridiculous. And it opens the door to anyone. I can't believe it. My neighbor could kill me. I just can't understand how people would say that this is some sort of reasonable compromise. Anyway, we have to be part of the political process, whether good comes of it or not.
And I don't have anything else to say. I'm not going to hide the reality. The reality is it's our civic responsibility to do what the best things we can in the time we've got. And we also know that this is a hard situation. Now, in the U.S., you're facing similar problems too, because in the U.S., assisted suicide was recently passed in California. California is got more people living in it than all of Canada. It's a big state. Right? Just land mass, it's pretty big, but population-wise, it's huge. So this is a devastating consequence. You know, you have assisted suicide in the U.S. legal in Washington State, in Oregon, and in Vermont, and now in California, it's going to start being legal as of June the 9th. June 9th. This is very concerning. Now, that legislation, the rules around it haven't come out yet, but I'm assuming it's going to be very similar to the Oregon model. And everyone says, oh, there's no problems with the Oregon law. Well, first of all, yes, there's been lots of problems with the Oregon law. There's no problem with the assisted suicide law in Washington State. Yes, there's been lots of problems. But the biggest problem is we don't understand how the law works. And that's what's so important. You know, the devil is in the details. How the law works is the same as in Belgium and the Netherlands and in Luxembourg and in Canada, how it's going to work, and in Quebec, where two doctors decide. One doctor, in the case of assisted suicide, one doctor writes the lethal prescription. And after you're dead, the doctor who wrote the prescription sends in the report. So once again, it's a situation where the same person approves it, writes the prescription, sends in the report. Now, when I'm driving down the highway, trying to get to work, and I'm going 30 kilometers, I know in the US that'd be what, 20 miles above the speed limit, do I call the police to pick me up? I know Al Smith does. When he's speeding, he's got his speed dial on his phone to call the police to come get him, because he feels so guilty that when he goes 1 mile above the speed limit. But do I call the police to pick me up? And the answer is no, I don't. It's not because I'm such a great sinner, not to say that I'm perfect, I'm not, but it's the same thing here. If you're going to give the doctor who approves it the same right to do it to also be the one who reports it, then of course the reports are going to look pretty clean. Because are they going to self-report abuse? If you're depressed, which in Oregon they're not allowed to do assisted suicide on depressed people. Like the law requires you to be completely competent and not depressed in Oregon. If you're depressed, is the doctor going to write in the report, Al Smith was depressed, but his wife really thought he should have it? Is that what he's going to write? Or Al Smith was depressed, but his condition is pretty bad, so I thought maybe it was a good idea? Or Al Smith is incompetent? Are they going to write that down? Of course not. So we don't know what's going on in Oregon because the system doesn't allow the truth. Right? If we actually wanted to know, I'm not saying it's a good idea to kill anybody, but if they actually wanted to be honest, I mean, if this were to be about honesty and trying to make sure that, we're controlling this, if this is what was the truth, then what they would have is they'd have a third party, someone from outside of that decision-making body actually oversee to make sure that actually the law was followed before anybody got a lethal dose. But they don't do that, you see. It's closed. Why is it a closed system? Because the system is designed to protect the doctor. The law is written for what reason? Is the law written for my body, my choice? No. The law is written to explain how the doctor, what he or she must do to cause your death. That's what the law is about. Okay, it's not about my body, my choice. It's about the rules the doctor must follow to cause my death. That's what it's about. And the doctor's not going to get involved with causing my death if the doctor's also worried about possibly being sued or prosecuted for something outside of the law. Has to protect the doctor. It doesn't protect me. If you read those rules of these laws, they're all designed to do what? Protect the doctor. So if you read the Canadian bill is designed that no doctor could ever be prosecuted, even if they did something terrible, because the law gives them total immunity. And the language of it is so loose that even if there was a real strong complaint about some wife saying, this is terrible what happened to my husband, and here I've got proof and everything, all the doctor would have to say, well, I was of the opinion. Holy moly, my friends. That's craziness. Okay, that's just craziness. We have to be brutally honest about this. I know I've been speaking on for quite a while, but I was on a show about 2 months ago, Al, and I was put on YouTube. You might remember that.
Right, yes.
And it was probably one of your friends who I was on their show, and YouTube took it off. And I'm not going to mention, I don't know why they did it. No, it wasn't on my YouTube channel. It wasn't my YouTube channel that got affected. It was their YouTube channel that got affected. They pulled it off. And because it had been recorded, we had the voice recording and everything. We had thousands and thousands and thousands. So I'm hoping this doesn't get pulled off. But if it does, at least everyone in the U.S. will have watched it because they'll be saying, why is YouTube pulling Schadenberg off again? Anyway, that's what happened to me a couple months ago. And I mean, in less than a week, we had 10,000 hits out. 10,000 in less than a week. And then the total, they couldn't even add up how many hits we had after a few weeks, just because YouTube pulled us. So I'm not saying that's going to happen, but I'm just saying it could happen, Al. We could become famous together over this one. Yeah. Nonetheless, California, I'm very concerned because, if you consider the number of deaths that doctors could be involved in a state the size of California, California is the biggest jurisdiction where they've legalized this, because if you consider the Netherlands, Netherlands is a small country. Belgium is a tiny country. Luxembourg is minuscule. Luxembourg is like Prince Edward Island. I think there's even less people in Luxembourg than Prince Edward Island. And your Americans are probably saying, where's Prince Edward Island? Think of Anna Green Gables. Anyway, it's tiny. It's tiny. Canada has got a fairly large population. Quebec doesn't. Quebec used to, doesn't anymore. So the fact of it is that that is devastating. And look at all the things. Does the law actually protect you in California? No, it's going to be very similar to the Oregon law. It's not designed to protect you. It's designed to protect the doctors who are involved in killing you. And you have to understand this. Now, Colorado. So Colorado had a bill in legislature this year to legalize assisted suicide, and the Colorado legislature defeated it. Good news. They defeated it. And so what happened is that Compassion and Choices, who are the euthanasia lobby or the assisted suicide lobby in the U.S., they have now launched letter writing, a petition, a signature campaign to put it on the ballot. Meanwhile, there's another person in Colorado who's also got another signature campaign going for their question, which is euthanasia. So Colorado is the first state since there was a vote in 1992, I believe, in Washington State or maybe California, and that would have allowed euthanasia also. But in the U.S., you guys are talking about assisted suicide, and you guys are saying no to euthanasia. So it's potentially going to be two ballot questions in Colorado. I'm assuming, though, that the one by Compassion and Choices might make it to the ballot and the other one won't because of the amount of money it takes to collect signatures. Because remember, this isn't about going to door to door and actually getting people's real opinions and getting them to sign on. This is about hiring signature collectors who work the malls everywhere throughout the state and who are being paid to get signatures. So you sign on to 10 different forms because you're saying, oh, yeah, let's do, okay, marijuana, euthanasia, and you sign all of them and you get it on the ballot. Now, this is very concerning that they're going to have a ballot question again, and this time in Colorado. And I'm thinking it's not on the ballot yet. Like they don't have the signatures yet, but it's very likely they'll get the signatures. This is going to be a major election issue for you in the U.S. Then there's also New York. New York's a very concerning place because the Compassion Choices has put a lot of money in New York. A ton of money, and they've got a ton of professional lobbyists working in New York to get this thing legalized in New York. It hasn't happened yet, and they might not get it this year, but they've put an awful lot of money in New York. And I'm assuming that with that kind of money, they're not putting money in New York just so they can have pizza together. It's because they're insistent on legalizing assisted suicide there, and that's a serious thing coming our way of what they're doing in New York. So this is what's going on. So I'm very concerned about California, and I think what's going on in Canada is completely insane. I cannot believe it. I cannot believe I'm a Canadian and reading this and actually thinking that they should be taken seriously. I just can't get it. You might have noticed, Al, in the newspaper just the other day that there was two Liberal senators saying that they're going to hold up the bill, not because it's written so widely, but because it's so restrictive. And I was thinking, I don't know. I don't know what world they're in. I don't care if they hold up the bill, because maybe the bill's so bad it should be held up. But I just don't know what world they're in. I can't figure it out. And of course, they say people of faith that we're a little bit crazy, because you see, these people say that, we don't think because we're people of faith. Well, read the Bill C-14 in Canada and tell me who's not thinking. I think this through. It's very dangerous to make something like that and to call it legislation and to impose it on us. And then to tell our doctors, you're going to have to refer people. You're going to have to send them to the executioner. That's insane.
Yeah. I always like to think of, those bracelets that say, what would Jesus do? And, I always think of my own, what would Sheen do? What would Bishop Sheen do? And there was a question that was asked at a public forum I went on, and it was Catholics talking amongst each other. And they asked the question, they said, the church has always talked about suicide and, that it's a mortal sin and the soul's in jeopardy. They mentioned the word hell, that people do go to hell, their souls go to hell. And the dialogue started about, hey, so these people involved with assisted suicide, what happens to the soul there? Will the church come in and give last rites before the person commits suicide? These are viable questions. These are legitimate questions. But, I kind of thought, what would Sheen do? And of course, I think we know the answer, but has this come across your desk? I know you're dealing with legislation and you're dealing with lawyers and lobbyists and all these people, politicians, but I know that in Canada, the Cardinal Thomas Collins, of course, the Archbishop of Toronto always seems to be daily in the newspapers and on television, giving the responses, fighting this bill tooth and nail. And again, that spiritual side, maybe you can give us a little update as what you're seeing and what's being spoken.
Well, it's not my area as much as it's your area, Al, but nonetheless, we know that Archbishop Pendergast answered the one question, the question of people seeking the last rites who have asked for euthanasia. And whether you're a person of faith or not, you can sort of see this as a problem. The priest comes in and he's being told by the person, oh, I'm dying by lethal injection tomorrow, Father. Can you give me my last rites? And it creates a serious problem because, of course, they're saying that tomorrow someone's going to kill me, and I've asked for it. It's a final act, right? Once the injection is done, you're not coming back. It's well, not on this earth, that is. You're dying. That's what's going on. So it's pretty final. And the Archbishop responded, well, the priest would have to say to them, well, I can't give you the last rites. I can help you out in every way and trying to encourage you not to do this. I can be with you if you need my emotional support. I can do everything humanly possible to help you not do this, but I can't give you your last rites, is what the Archbishop said. And if you think it through, he's not being harsh, he's being honest. Like, it creates a serious dilemma. But maybe you should talk more about the other issues, because of course the problem that comes down to it is the rejection of life. We have to think about that. It's a very tough thing, because there's two issues here, because remember, it's not the same as suicide, even though it's similar, because someone else is causing your death. So it is a form of homicide.
Yeah.
But you willed it. Now, you may not have always willed it. And that's the other problem. You may not have always willed it. You might have been really down and emotionally distraught and not quite in your mind, and all that's true. But for the most part, you might have willed it. You've asked for it. So maybe you should comment on that more.
Okay, we will. Now, we've talked for an hour, and it's amazing how time flies, but there's been so much information. So we will do a show on the spiritual ramifications or the spiritual realities of this euthanasia, assisted suicide, and what will happen. This is why the Cardinal in Canada is talking about conscience and talking about, you can't force Catholic hospitals, and you can't, there's a spiritual war going on. I mean, we read Ephesians chapter 6, verses 10 to 20, war against principalities and powers, all this stuff. And so we will, I promise our viewers,
but there is another issue that you're coming to, and you mentioned about the conscience issue, and that is we've just had a few doctors say that they're going to quit as doctors if they're forced.
Yes.
They have to refer.
Yeah. Now we'll stay with this. I mean, our chat room, everybody is still, they've been saying to us, please say some more. So we'll stay for another, at least, stay another 15, 20, 30 minutes until everybody says they want to go to bed. But no.
What if I want to go to bed?
No,
it's my beautiful wife's birthday tomorrow.
Okay.
So, obviously there's a limit to this.
Okay. So we still have the parting gifts of the Bishop Sheen hoodie for you for coming on to the show, and you're worthy.
That's pretty important.
Yeah, okay. So please stay for at least 15 more minutes and give us this one. Talk about this issue of conscience clause, because it is what people are asking about.
Well, the conscience rights are very important for both the doctors and for us. So first of all, to the doctors, a doctor that doesn't want to kill you cannot be also told, oh, by the way, you're going to have to send your patient to the executioner, because it's a morally complicit act, no matter how you look at it. I don't understand why the secularists, I think what's happening is the secularists actually want those doctors who are more, how would you say, religiously motivated, or doctors who believe in the sanctity of human life, to leave medicine. So the other day there was a doctor who wrote into the Canadian Medical Association journal. So this is the journal of the Canadian Medical Association. This is pretty important. And she's actually, interesting enough, a doctor from Strathroy, Ontario, not far from where I live. And she writes that she's been a doctor for 37 years, a family physician for 37 years. For the last 3 years, she's been just completely focused on palliative care. So what she's done is she was a family physician who closed her family practice 3 years ago to completely devote herself to palliative care. She said, if they're going to force me to refer, I'm going to quit. Okay? She's planning to quit. She says, I want to continue being a physician. So you have to do the math. She's been a physician for 37 years. She's probably 62 or 63 years old, or something in that range. If she's that age and she's a physician who's active still, she's probably a very well-experienced physician. She's saying, I'm not going to kill my patients. I'm not going to do it. I took an oath. I'm not going to do that. And I'm not going to send them to someone else to do it either. I'm not going to do it. That is absolutely wrong. I will leave medicine. Now think about this. We need palliative care doctors in Canada. Here's one who's got experience, probably caring, probably a very caring person, and she will leave rather than kill you or refer you. Well, we lose good doctors. Okay, I was speaking in Pembroke a few months ago, and a doctor was at the talk who came up to me after my talk. He said to me, Alex, I'm 62 years old, so that means about the same time, 35, 36, 37 years. I had no intention of retiring, but I started receiving letters from the Ontario College of Physicians telling me that I'm going to have to do referrals. And I decided, I'm not going to do that. I'm not going to lose my medical license over this. I'm not going to be brought to some Human Rights Commission. I'm going to retire. So that community of Pembroke, which is not a massive city or anything, it's a nice little community, loses a doctor who's experienced and willing to care for his patients, and probably, after that many years of experience, probably a pretty good doctor. Retires early. Now, why did he retire early? Because he wasn't going to be morally complicit with the act. I'm not going to do that. So we're losing these good doctors. Now, let's put it another way. There's a couple doctors I know who are in their 30s, young doctors. They're married, they have families, and they're saying, I'm not going to kill. I'm never going to do that. I've taken an oath. I'm not going to do that. I don't believe it's ever right, and I'm not going to refer. Are they going to stay in Canada, Al? If they're told they're going to have to refer, are they going to stay? No. We're going to lose them. You know who's going to gain them? The Americans. Because there's several U.S. states that have laws protecting conscience rights. And there's just as many sick people in the U.S. as in Canada. Now, the U.S. is a bigger country, so maybe there's more sick people there than in Canada, meaning percentage that you're bigger, right? But I mean, the doctor's degree, becoming a medical doctor, is transferable to other places. They can go to South Carolina. They can go to wherever. They can become a doctor there and care for sick people there. We lose them And people like me would like to have a doctor who's not going to kill me in my time of need. When I'm going through a deep, dark time in my life and feel my life has lost hope, feel my life has lost value, I don't need the doctor to say, oh, I can lethally inject you. I need that doctor to say, no, Alex, I'm not going to abandon you. I'm going to care for you. I'm going to recognize that you are going through that dark time of your life, and that's a normal human reaction to be going through that. I'm going to care for you. I'm not going to kill you. That's what I need. That's what I want. That's what a lot of people want. And those doctors are going to leave Canada unless we protect their conscience rights. What about institutions? Catholic hospitals, hospitals that have been set up by religious communities. There's quite a few of them across Canada still. Nursing homes. There's quite a few religiously instituted nursing homes. I got quite a few emails. There's Christian Reformed churches. There is the Salvation Army have quite a few nursing homes, quite a few of them. Good places that have lots of volunteer help. They're making sure that you're not alone. They're trying to keep you active. You're not lonely because they actually care about you. These places are being told. The legislation doesn't limit itself to hospitals alone. It's also nursing homes because it mentions medical facilities. So if you're going to force them to have to be complicit with it, what are they going to do? They're going to have to say, no, we're not going to do this. We're not going to be involved in this. And then you have the euthanasia crowd saying, well, why don't you pull their funding? Oh, because the place won't kill me, you're going to pull their funding? Well, that's craziness. A lot of these places actually take care of the poorer members of our elderly population because they're willing to do so because they have more of a volunteer staff that's part of their situation. Plus, they have a view of their role as not only caring for people who are wealthy who can live here, but they're also willing to take in some people who have a lower income. And we'll lose those if they're forcing them to do it. So this is a serious question. And then the other question is, of course, conscious rights. Conscious rights are there to protect you as a patient. As I mentioned, we all are human beings. We're all going to find ourselves depressed sometime in our life. We're all going to find ourselves in a situation where maybe we feel our life has lost value. In the case of your situation, Al, I know your wife will always say, Al, I know you're down, but I still love you. So you have that, Al. Some people don't have that. And they will go to a deep, dark time, and they might feel that life has no purpose anymore. We need them to be protected. And only a doctor who is not willing to kill you will protect you. And we need them in our system. That's the type of doctor I want to be going to. And we can't let them be pushed out of our country.
Amen. Amen. And on that note, Alex, of course, we'll kind of wind up the show or wind down the show because you got me wound up. That's for sure. And everybody that's in the chat room, Norman and Marilyn and Pat and Chat Mom, the list goes on. Thank you for staying with us overtime tonight. We'd like to share with our viewers and our listeners some of the websites that you have. I mean, the main one we want to put everybody to is your Euthanasia Prevention Coalition website. And there, of course, it can direct you to your award-winning blog. I think you have one of the most read blogs of anybody in this field. And so God love you for that.
I have the largest blog of anywhere on these issues. And so if you click to it, it's alexschadenberg.blogspot.com, or you can go to epcc.ca and click on the blog. You'll find there's more information there than you'll find anywhere else. It's just right. Whether I like it or not.
Yeah. And this is, I think, what everybody is saying. Give me more information. If they go to the epcc.ca website, there's everything.
Hungry for more, Al? Is that what you're saying?
Yeah, I'm hungry for more. That's why you're on the show. And listen, Al, we're going to have you on sooner than later because we're in this trial. I mean, everybody, the Americans, of course, there's things happening all the time there too. And of course, we'd love to have you on the next couple of weeks. We need to know more. We need to maybe hear some feedback of some of the protests that will start to happen over the next few weeks. People taking to the streets in the community to talk about this issue, that it's not a good law. It's not a good idea. And so we'll share with our viewers and our listeners again, ongoing feedback and a little bit more dialogue, because we're sitting here saying, we just need some guidance. Help me understand this issue and to understand the lies of the devil. Because again, the whole dying with dignity group, and there's the lies that they talk about. We need to we encounter these people, how to engage the culture and build a culture of life, as John Paul II said so many times. And I'd like to say Saint John Paul II, but building the culture of life. And so we'll do that next time on Hungry for More. But I thought what we would do is end in prayer. But I tell you, we need a doctor, a good doctor, as you said. And we'll go back to one of the doctors of the church, St. Teresa of Avila. And I feel I need to say that prayer once again, that beautiful prayer that talks about let nothing disturb you, let nothing frighten you. So I'll have my producer, Ken Kowalski, bring that prayer up on the screen one more time, and we'll end with that prayer. And so please join with me. In the name of the Father, and the Son, and the Holy Spirit. Amen. Let nothing disturb you. Let nothing frighten you. All things are passing. God never changes. Patience obtains all things. Nothing is wanting to him who possesses God. God alone suffices. In the name of the Father, and the Son, and the Holy Spirit. Amen. Thank you, Alex Schadenberg, for joining me. And I tell you, everyone, stay hungry, stay holy, and we'll see you next time on Hungry for More.